Welcome everyone to this event today, and on behalf of Community World Service Asia, thank you so much for making yourself available for today's session, Quality and Accountability Mainstreaming Panel Discussion, responding to the question, is accountability truly embedded in organizations' core values and activities? Or rather, what does it take for accountability to be truly embedded in organizations' core values and activities? My name is Uma, and I will be the moderator today. As you can perhaps appreciate, organization tend to embark on the accountability mainstreaming process through various entry points. Some of them may take on a certification process from the core humanitarian standard perspective, and some may start with having accountability at the project level. So today the panel discussion will explore the different ways of mainstreaming accountability. And I have the privilege of moderating the session. I'm an independent consultant with a background of human resources, OD, as well as accountability. This event is hosted by Community World Service Asia, and ACT Church of Sweden are the organizing panel discussion for this, what we call 2020 Regional Humanitarian Partnership Events, which is in collaboration with the Asian Disaster Reduction and Response Network, ADRRN, ICWA, as well as OCHA. And I will let the host later speak a little bit about Community World Service Asia. However, Community World Service Asia is the host of the Quality and Accountability Hub for the ADRRN. And they are also the regional partner of Sphere in Asia and has been promoting quality and accountability for over a decade through various means, as well as in disasters such as the Typhoon Haiyan, in tsunami, as well as in Myanmar and Pakistan mainly. So today we have a panel representing different levels, different perspectives around Q&A, quality and accountability mainstreaming. Before we dive into the panel introduction, I want to highlight who is in the room. Kuram, do you have the poll results? If I can just look at who is in the room. So yes, we are looking at 51 participants so far. And for those of you who have done the poll, let's see. So we have 3% from Europe, mainly from Asia, and we have South Asia probably 74%. And then we have a few from Africa. Welcome in Southeast Asia. Welcome everyone. And mostly, I think 50% are from NGOs. And then we have another almost 50% from INGO. Okay, and most of you are representing one platform or the other, like Sphere, CHS Alliance, ADRRN, ICWA, and 20% are not members of this network. So if you can see the poll, 65% you have dedicated accountability positions in your organization, and maybe 1/3 you do not have. And these are the other questions, which I will not go through. But what I would like to do is to quickly run through the housekeeping, the usual housekeeping, and then we can get into the session. So today's webinar is scheduled for about 90 minutes or less now, since we are already 10 minutes into the session. And I am afraid, since we are talking about accountability, balance of power, giving up power, I'm afraid the organizers hold the entire power today, and they have muted your videos and mics. So this is by default, just to manage the background noise. Feel free to use the chat box. I myself can only see the panelists and the speakers and see myself, which is not exciting, but that's how it is with this technology today. You can chat with us using the chat box, comment box, and please post your questions in the question box as well. We will be running maybe another poll later, which we would like to get your view on. And this webinar is being recorded and will be available on our website for others to listen to. Should you have any concerns or complaints about the webinar or the host or any one of us who are organizing this event, please feel free to use the complaint response mechanism of Community World Service Asia, and I'm sure Zainab or Kuram will put it up on the chat box as to where you can find out. Let's look at the format of today's session briefly. It's pretty straightforward. We will start with an opening remark from the host, and then right after we will have the panel discussion. We have 3 speakers today. We are very privileged to have Mayforth Luneta from CDP Philippines. We have Higuchi Hiroaki from the Japan platform, and we have Colleen Hemskirk from ACT Church of Sweden. I'll make a little bit more introduction later on. After the panelists' presentation, we will open the floor to give you an opportunity to ask specific questions that you've been thinking about mainstreaming accountability, or any questions reflected around this topic. Feel free as we go along to share your reflections on the chat box as well. We have already received a few comments and questions at the time of registration. I will highlight these and I'll raise this again if I find that the speakers have not covered these questions. So if you are all ready, I would like to invite our opening remarks speaker, who is Shama Mall. We have Shama Mall, who is the regional director. She's actually the deputy director for Community World Service Asia. At the moment, she's acting as the regional director. And she's been with Community World Service Asia for almost 20 years in various capacities. Shama is also the vice chair of CHS Alliance Board. And today she's calling in from Pakistan. I asked Shama what excites you about accountability or mainstreaming of accountability. And she says that meeting people at the community level who are vocal about their rights and make efforts to bring change in their community is very exciting for her and gives her a lot of energy. And what frustrates her about accountability is that sometimes there's a lot of rhetoric in the sector and very little action when it comes to accountability. And inequitable partnership, when local partnerships or communities are not treated with dignity, is something also that frustrates Shama when it comes to accountability. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming Shama, and she's going to start the opening remark. Shama, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Uma. It seems I have more frustrations. Hello, everyone. A very warm welcome to all of you who are participating in today's webinar, including our panelists. So when I was thinking about the topic for today's webinar, my mind went back about a decade and a half and our journey of committing to accountability, promoting it and mainstreaming it within CWSA, and why it's so important to us. So our journey formally started in 2005 when South Asia and Northern Pakistan in particular was hit by a devastating earthquake. Thousands of people were killed at the time and many more affected. So our organization carried out a very large emergency response. We had to rapidly scale up. It required us to adapt and strengthen our operational and resource management systems. Due to the scale of the disaster, there were concerns around access, coordination, protection, and safeguarding. There was also discourse on how best to support the diverse range of stakeholders that were responding at the time in applying the sphere and companion standards, and as well as the HAP standard, the Humanitarian Accountability Partnership at the time, so that accountability towards affected populations could be ensured. So it was in this context that CWSA agreed to host the sphere country focal point role in 2006, and we continue to do so. And a few years later, the HAP partner role as well in Pakistan. I think this was a turning point for us. We recognize that by committing to accountability and carrying out these roles, not only would it build our own capacity on accountability, but it would provide us the opportunity to engage and learn from the wider humanitarian sector as well, and also influence, advocate, and promote accountability more widely. Like many of you, it's very important for us that during any response or longer term engagement, the affected communities are treated with dignity and they fully participate in the process and hold us to account. So in order to embed accountability into our organization, we formally started the mainstreaming process in about 2011 onwards, with an emphasis of building an organizational culture around accountability. So mainstreaming does require resources, technical support, time, and commitment of the leadership and staff. We were lucky that a couple of our funding partners were willing to support our mainstreaming process for the first initial 2 or 3 years and also participate in the process. It involved mutual learning during the process, including a peer review. So it was really an empowering process and a great learning experience for us. So in our view, mainstreaming is not a means to an end. It's not a one-time exercise. It's a continuous process. And even now, we have to put considerable effort to maintain, strengthen, and review the application of our mainstreaming strategy. So a commitment towards accountability and mainstreaming it, in our experience, means a number of things. Firstly, leadership buy-in. This is an absolute must because it involves change in an organization and rebalancing of power as well. CWSA was lucky to have the commitment of its leadership, and that was a real push behind our uptake of accountability, both internally and externally. Our organizational structure and consequently decision-making and delegation of authority is decentralized as a result of mainstreaming. This also means that commitment and ownership is needed from various levels of leadership in the organization. At times, it has been a challenge also for us, whereby even one manager isn't fully committing or owning the process. It creates hurdles. For example, it can result in inconsistency in the quality of programming or the degree to which affected communities participate in decision-making in a project, or how learning and continual improvement takes place in a team or a project. Commitment to accountability also means the willingness to change our behavior within our organizations, between organizational partnerships, and with communities as well. So at the organizational level, change in mindset of staff, of course, is not easy. Even after training, development of policies and practices, we experience that staff are good at relating to policies and technical aspects of accountability, but some may find it difficult to relate to it in practice in their day-to-day activities. I think commitment and mainstreaming on accountability needs to translate also into more meaningful engagement and participation at the community level. During the current pandemic, we would not have been able to work remotely had we not invested in community-led structures over the years and utilized their capacities. They are still instrumental in accessing certain vulnerable groups and communicating the needs of such people. So I think another important aspect is the need to be prepared to find ways of mainstreaming and promoting accountability with limited resources. This has been a real challenge for us. It's ironic that there are so little resources for something that can improve the effectiveness of humanitarian action and sustainability of long-term programming. I think yet despite the limited resources, CWSA has come a long way in how we engage with the communities we work with, based on more community-led approaches and empowering partnerships. We remain committed and continue to promote quality and accountability in our capacity as regional partner of SPHERE in Asia, and also from the ADR Quality and Accountability Hub, which we manage, that Uma mentioned. We've managed to train over 9,000 practitioners in Asia, even though most of our regional trainings are not funded. In addition, these trainings have led to our own learning and capacity strengthening as well, given that such trainings bring so much experience from different contexts. In the process, we have also forged some excellent partnerships to promote and advocate on mutual areas of interest pertaining to accountability. I think this 2020 Regional Humanitarian Partnership events is one such example as well. Promoting more accountable practices is even more important now in context of localization. We believe in promoting more equitable partnerships among stakeholders, be it between the different communities and those we assist, or between different partners, or between northern and southern organizations as well. And one example of this type of partnership is the one between CWSA and ACT Church of Sweden. It's our mutual commitment to promote accountability that brings us together, as we believe that we can be a stronger voice together. But CWSA most of the time takes the lead owing to its experience, though on some areas like TSEA, we rely and learn from them. So just to conclude, our journey of committing to accountability and mainstreaming it has been extremely rewarding in many ways, despite how demanding it can be at times for a national organization like ours. So thank you very much, and over to you, Uma.
Thank you, Shama, and thank you for setting the tone for the day. We now have almost 65 participants on board. So welcome to those of you who have just joined. And we have just concluded the opening remark from Community World Service Asia, the host for today's event. Next, moving on, we will go on to the panelist discussion, and we will have the first speaker. And today I have the privilege of introducing May 4th D. Luneta, who is the Deputy Executive Director for the Center for Disaster Preparedness Foundation, CDP, CDP for short, in the Philippines. CDP does capacity building, advocacy, research, humanitarian response related work. And today, Luneta is, May 4th is calling from the Philippines, and she is going to talk about accountability at various levels. And that includes how they have strengthened accountability internally within CDP, with the communities, with the partners, and also with the government. And I know some of you are asking about how to strengthen accountability with the different partners, as well as vertical, horizontal accountability. And I see a comment there from Matai Kuti, which I acknowledge. So I hope that May 4th will shed some light around this topic. May 4th, if you're ready, the floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm so happy to be here to share with you what we have been doing in our organization. And as I hear what Shama was saying, it's truly inspirational that being accountable and you're walking the talk is really one good indicator that you would have better services for the community. And in so doing, I'm trying to share my screen, but host disabled participant screen sharing. Huh. Let me. Anyways, let me just continue. Anyway, so the Center for Disaster Preparedness is, as Uma was saying, we're an organization in the Philippines wherein we deal with different partners on disaster risk reduction and management. Our vision is to have communities that would have safe, resilient, and developed communities. And we can only do that if we continue to empower, strengthen the people in the community, the most vulnerable sectors, and also the duty bearers and the stakeholders having the synergy of doing equitable programming for disaster risk reduction and management. And so it is always good to have constant consultation and constant uh, dealing with the communities, the people that you serve, so that you will have better programs and you can be better accountable to all your programs. So if I'm sorry, I am trying to share my screen. Oh, there. All right. Sorry. Now share. Okay. So accountability, hopefully we're trying as an organization, we're trying to make it our way of life, because you'll be responsible to your action. Currently, we're a member of ALNAP. We're, of course, we're also a member of ADRRN. These organizations, of course, promote accountability and all the very good frameworks that we are all trying to do. Well, we're far from perfect, but these things that we would like to share with you what we did in the communities with our partner governments and partner NGOs and project partners, and as well as within CDP. Uh, in the community, we try to have different tools wherein we can check our ways of working. We can check how we deal with people. We can check our programs that our projects and programs that we are doing with them, whether it is still on the right track, whether it is for the benefit of the people, or not just because we have a project. The way to do it is, of course, the usual M&E tools that we have, but this time we try to mainstream it in our programs, whether or not the project requires feedbacking or meal planning. We are now trying to incorporate it in our own institution, the different tools wherein we will have to ask the community and the different partners in the project. So, but as I've said, the number one portion wherein we try to be accountable for or with is the community. So, this is one tool wherein we ask them. It's either usually in the middle of the project or at the end of the project, the usual cycle that you have in the projects. But this time, we let them do the tool is very free flowing, wherein they would write their comments in our strategies, in whatever we do, and then they will tell what facilitated the good practice, and uh, the what hinders the success of the project, and then the recommendations. uh, this tool, we did develop as time went by, when we started with do you know the community scorecard? The community scorecard, we did it also with one of our projects with Oxfam, and then from there we also have our own way, which is this our we call it community evaluation tree. By doing this, we are at least being mindful of how we deal with our communities. So that's one part. Uh, when we can show our accountability by having constant consultation and feedbacking with our community partners. Now the second one is, how do we have this how do we promote accountability with our partners and the government, and also with our other project partners. uh, One example is that we continue with our different advocacies, wherein we try to connect the things that we have learned from our community partners to the national level, our government and other stakeholder partners, so that they would also be able to use the data from the community, and they would be able to make also improve also the government programs that they have. So one example is what we had with the inclusive data management system, wherein during the COVID-19 pandemic, we, together with our partners, the Life Haven and the people organization with people with disability, um, had a survey, and what is the effect of the programs of COVID-19 programs of the government to the persons with disability. And they had this survey, and they were able to compile the data, wherein the persons with disability were able to do some recommendations, and give some raw data wherein the government will be able to make their programs more inclusive. So that is another way of how we do it. So first, as I've said a while ago, we have tools in the community and constant feedbacking mechanism with the community. Second is we try to connect the community feedback to the national government through our different advocacies. So again, we have simple tools just like this one. It's not yet in it's still in the finalization phase, but hopefully after this project has ended, we're hoping if it is already okay, we will be able to share it with you, maybe through our website. So the good news with that the use of the survey, the persons with disability were able to launch their advocacy in having inclusive COVID-19 response, which of course the government was able to use it and make a better program for COVID-19 here in the Philippines. And so that's the second part. So we do advocacies in order to make people to become more accountable. And then of course the last one, as I've already shown you all, uh, I've already shared also with the partners, is with CDP. In our organization, to make sure that we ourselves are really walking the talk, we had a very interesting and a very unique structure in our organization, wherein one of our board members is one of our staff in our organization, meaning a regular staff with which is not sitting in the management committee, which was elected by the different staff in our organization, will be selected and elected and will become one of the board members. So by doing that, there would be ensured representation of regular staff in the board members and making policies for the betterment of the organization. So it's not only those who are the members of the management committee who would have a say in managing, but also making sure that the regular people in our organization would also contribute to making policies and making important decisions in our organizations, just like as we are always promoting with our community partners and other partners in project wise or advocacy wise. So that's how we do our 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 walk in accountability. Hope this helps, and maybe later we can share more. That's it. Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you, Mayforth. I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions. I can already see a couple of questions on the chat box related to dealing with the government as well as communities and whatnot. So do watch out that space. I'm going to move on to the next speaker. Next in line today, we have the pleasure of having Mr. Higuchi Hiroaki, who is the manager of Program Development Division, and he's also from the Monitoring and Evaluation Division from Japan Platform. He has been with Japan Platform since 2015, covering Gaza and South Sudan. He has worked as country representative for several Japanese organizations based in Cambodia, South Sudan, and Kenya. So ladies and gentlemen, he has perspectives both from Asia and Africa. You will see his background of the video. It's as if he's in Africa, but today Higuchi is calling from Tokyo, Japan. I asked him what excites him about accountability and what frustrates him about accountability accountability. And what excites Higuchi about accountability is the fact that when all the stakeholders come together and discuss and move forward with regard to strengthening of accountability. What frustrates Higuchi is sometimes talking to government officials because it can be quite demanding. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming Higuchi. Higuchi, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, and maybe good evening. My name is Hiroaki Higuchi, working with Japan Platform. First, just have 1 minute to introduce a Japan Platform. Well, Japan Platform instituted on years of 2000. Then, our purpose is to allocate funds to Japanese NGO very quickly, simply because we focus on especially humanitarian aid projects. Then, well, I think we have unique prominence about our organization that Japan Platform is NGO, but we are consisting of 3 parties. One is business committee, second is NGO, civil society, and third is government. So these 3 parties are making Japan Platform itself. So I can say Japan Platform is a consortium to allocate funds to NGO. Yep. Today, thank you for inviting me to talk about quality and accountability. And let's go first page. First, today, I'd like to talk about 4 points. First, a limitation of reporting. Everybody knows there is 2 basic accountability about reporting. First, accountability to donors. Yeah, there are some types of reports like monthly report, interim report, blah, blah, them. Second type of report, that is 1.2, accountability to beneficiaries. Of course, those NGOs use community consultations, dialogues, participatory reviews for accountability to beneficiaries. Then, well, the reporting system typically provides donors with a written account comprising information in a form they have requested to help ensure that the funds they have donated have been used for the purpose they have specified. Then this is usually, I think, in the form of one-way flow of information from who? From NGO to donors. Yep. Then with the focus being on the efficiency with which the donors' funds have been spent. And then, in some cases, I feel like reporting formats itself often appear inflexible and rarely show the scope for reporting to donors, the voice and experience of field officers and beneficiaries in the field. So I always think that, why don't donors listen to the voice of NGO, especially field worker and beneficiaries, as well as accountability to beneficiaries, like NGO do practice in the field? That's my, suggestion and question to you. Then, please, next page. Yeah, second, I'd like to talk about quantitative and qualitative performance indicators. Well, there will be perception that many donors pay relatively little attention to the narrative discussion that helps to provide an important context for the qualified performance indicators. And second, I'm wondering how the donors know the overall impact by seeing only quantitative performance indicators. Where, I give you example. Like sometimes, okay, this is my experience in Africa. Yeah, when out to Africa for monitoring and evaluation purpose, then that was education project. And when look at new school they constructed, one NGO officer said, there is one performance indicator that enrollment was improved from 5% to 80%. Yes, understand what he's saying. But that field worker has concern that, indicator itself is not bad, but, only one indicator doesn't mention the quality of education, right? For example, even if, you improved enrollment rate, like from 5% to 80%, but I can see, look at, there is more than 200 pupils in the classroom. Then can we say, the overall impact is good? We can't say, yeah? So that's what I thought through my experiment. And for example, a second example, when I saw kind of workshop, then when I interviewed one field workers, he said like, he wanted to hold a workshop like divided into 5 or 6 groups, but unfortunately, he invited something like 100 participants at once. I definitely asked him, why did you so? Why did you invite 100 participants? He said, because of donor. They want to see quick result. So at first they planned, they want to divide into 5 or 6 groups. But since, donor over demand to see quick results. So, unfortunately, he had on that workshop together with 100 participants. Then, how can we keep, quality of workshop? Yeah, it's not possible. It's so funny. Yeah, such kind of experience, I'm seeing in the field. Yeah, so to address, this kind of issue, I recommend that not only quantitative, performance indicators, but let's mix like mixture of quantitative and qualitative performance indicators, so that everybody understand on the ground in the field. Yeah, that's my suggestion. And I have another recommendation is that in this area is to allow, I think, debates and discussion with NGO workers in the field and beneficiaries for what? To help and determine appropriate performance indicators for specific project. I think that is my further recommendation. Okay, let's go to the next page. Yeah, third, disadvantage of accountability mechanism, where accountability to donors usually either do not provide the report of unintended consequences or failures in aspects of the delivery of aid project. Yep. Then to ensure that effectiveness of current and future aid project. Oh, sorry, it disappeared. Okay, yeah. Okay. So to ensure that effectiveness of current and future aid projects can be improved through learning from unintended consequences and mistakes in existing project. And I'd like to say failure is a chance of success. Yeah. Where although some donors want to be provided with information about unintended consequences, or maybe let me call it failures in aspects of project delivery, then from different view, NGO workers indicate that they find difficulties in reporting problem simply because donors do not give the scope for the reporting of this kind of information. And there is reluctance on the side of NGO to report unintended consequences or failures. That's what I think. And some NGO, yeah, of course, prefer, to emphasize, to mention only their success rather than the failure in the aid delivery project. Then, in another view, in the long term, however, as you know, failure could help the NGOs run and ensure more sustainable development by quickly appreciating and responding to the cause of a short-term failure. And then, furthermore, reporting of unintended consequences in aspects of project delivery is important, as it provides an opportunity to inform donors about what kind of difficulties you are facing in the field. Yeah, otherwise, how could donor know about your difficulties you are trying in the field? Yeah, the other side, donor also should understand, that point. There is a perception that in practice of some unintended consequences and failures would be appreciated, acceptable, and constructive. So I can say for both NGOs and donors about that point. Okay, let's go to next. Yes. Then different priorities. Some cases are shown that there is a discrepancy about accountability problems owing to understanding between the priority of international NGO and local NGO. And in this case, for instance, some Japanese NGO definitely have a partner, which is CBO, a community-based organization, in the project site. And then sometimes I feel like such kind of discrepancy. For example, when Japan platform have examination committee for project proposal, definitely such kind of project that international NGO cooperate with CBO, we have memorandum, memorandum of understanding. Let me call it MOU. Always. Then, for me, in that case, definitely I check 5 points. Like first, each NGO should understand their mission, and second, what is specialty of that CBO and international NGO, and third, about TOR. TOR clearly describe like specialty and the role of each organization, and how about responsibility, each responsibility. Do they have discussion to determine that contents of TOR together? That's an important thing you should discuss together, yeah? And fourth, financial mechanism. If financial mechanism is not clear, definitely, I have a suspicion that this one example, can we have a money transfer? Like, I know some countries like Syria or Yemen, blah, blah, it's quite difficult to have such, money transfer because of the context there. So in that case, definitely, before project start, we have to confirm such kind of financial mechanism, including INGO and CBO. And first, I always check who monitors that project, done by international NGO or CBO or you, both do that. Because sometimes, that responsibility is not clear among NGOs. And that's why I always check, when we receive project proposal. So I'd like to say it might be necessary to develop and implement practice that seek to counteract the negative impact, the negative effects of the power imbalance between international NGO and CBOs. So, I think Shaman already mentioned that they do peer review. Yeah, I also strongly recommend that point. Among NGO, let's have and develop peer review practice, both to determine best practice and to identify maybe mistake or failure, and to help NGOs that they are performing just now and for upcoming projects. Yeah, with a few hours, I think those key points, especially, I'm keeping in mind always when I do work. And today, thank you for this opportunity, and let's have open discussion. What do you think about it? Thank you very much, Uma.
Thank you, Higuchi, and I really take home this point about quantitative versus qualitative, one thing that I have observed as part of accountability mainstreaming, organizations tend to narrow down their commitment and focus more on the quality and not only the quantity. So I think that's a very important point. And also you mentioned quite a few practical tips on how accountability can be strengthened, and also from M&E perspective. I'm sure there will be more questions around how we can work this better in terms of working also with the government and donors. So I'll come back to you with the questions. Let's move on to the last but not least, and thank you, Higuchi. Let's move on to the last but not least, the speaker today. We have Colleen Himskirk, and Colleen is the Director of Strategic Planning from ACT Church of Sweden, and she's also the board member of CHS Alliance since late 2019. Colleen has held numerous accountability portfolios in the past, including auditor for CHS, CRM investigation, and today she's calling in from Sweden, and I am so glad I'm not calling from Sweden because it's very early in Sweden. Thank you, Colleen, for getting up so early. Now, I asked Colleen what excites her about accountability, and for Colleen, she says that quality programming to ensure relevance for the affected population excites her. And what frustrates Colleen about accountability is not using resources widely, and also having too many due diligence processes and different requirements from donors. I'm sure some of you can relate to that, leading to less efficiency and less focus on affected populations. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear from Colleen. Please give a virtual applause if you can. Colleen, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Maybe I'll say good morning, but also good afternoon to everybody on this call. It's very happy to be here with you today. I think there's a PowerPoint that will be put up for ACT Church of Sweden. Is that correct? Or do I share it myself? There we go. Thanks. So just a quick PowerPoint presentation to give you information about who ACT Church of Sweden is. We are a professional aid organization, but we are also part of the Church of Sweden. The Church of Sweden is quite large, with about 7 million members. Sweden has 10 million of a population. So Church of Sweden is quite broad and the largest church in Sweden. But we are also a professional aid organization. If we go to the next slide, I just want to show where we work within the world. If you see the blue colors, that's where we have our country programs, and the yellow color is where we have our humanitarian projects. If there's both colors, then we have both of those interventions happening in the same place. We have about 31 humanitarian responses that we've done within this past year. And then we also have 25 country programs, which are long-term development programs. We also have a global advocacy program that we do, where we work a lot within advocacy in Sweden, within Europe, but also globally. We are a member of the ACT Alliance. We are also members of Lutheran World Federation and the World Council of Churches. If we can click again, we had decided actually well, we were HAP certified, but then we were the first organization in the world to be certified against the CHS standard, and that was in 2016. There was 5 organizations that were certified around the same time. We are certified not only for the humanitarian work that we do, but also for the long-term development work and our advocacy work. So our entire work portfolio within ACT Church of Sweden is CHS certified. If we move forward to the next slide, just to let you know the scope of our work, we work very much from a thematic perspective. And within that, we work with gender equality. So ensuring that there is equality within all our programs and the work that we do together with our partners. We also, as we are a church, work on development and theology, so how that fits together, sexual reproductive health and rights, is also part of our programming. As a progressive church, we find that's a really important part of our identity and who we are, standing up for rights and from a theological perspective. We look also at fair and sustainable livelihoods, in particular a lot about climate. So this is fantastic. I can come and be with you from Sweden. All of us can be together without having to travel to save that. Of course, there's other reasons why it is the case. And we also work for just peace and again, humanitarian action, where we have a focus on community-based psychosocial approach. So looking at how to, from a community-based perspective, looking at mental health after an intervention. I think I don't have any more slides, so we can maybe close off the slides and then you'll just get to see me. But just to talk about, we have been certified. We became members of HAP, which then became part of the CHS Alliance since about 2011. And our organization had to work quite a bit, and we decided to become CHS certified. And going through that process made it so that we really had to embed accountability into our work, because every year now we are audited against the CHS standard. We have to demonstrate how we are meeting the 9 commitments within the CHS. What we decided to do as an organization is, instead of having our staff understand the CHS and to know the CHS, is to decide to develop our own quality framework and to say, how is it that we defined quality and accountability, and making sure that the aspects that we are certified against within the CHS are there, but also our identity as an organization, and to put it into the words and the language that makes sense to our staff. So our commitments to quality and accountability actually start off with coming from the human rights-based approach. That's our first commitment, is that we implement with the human rights-based approach. Our second commitment is gender mainstreaming through all of our programs. There's been quite a lot of work we've been doing on that. It's something that we continue to work on. We also look at environmental sustainability. That is our third commitment. And our fourth commitment, and one that's extremely important to us, is to have equal and mutually accountable partnerships. We, as an organization, do not deliver service delivery ourselves. We often work together with partners who implement the service delivery. What we do implement is through the thematic aspects, so knowledge and capacity building within gender, theology and development, as I mentioned, and whatnot. But for us, it's extremely important to have mutual accountable partnerships. And we talk a lot within our organization about a partner dialogue. We are not only a partner, but we are in part a donor to many of our partners, because we have access to funding and we create that access to funding to partners. But we want to make sure that we have a mutually accountable partnership. And therefore, because we are certified, we have to work with our partners to ensure that they are also implementing with quality and accountability. So because we aren't service delivery, I mean, you could ask, why did we decide to be CHS certified, and why did we do that for all of our programs? Well, we did it because we want to ensure that the affected communities are at the center of our work. We want to ensure that we have to implement with the commitments that we have made as an organization. We also, as an organization, want to commit to continual learning. So not just that, okay, we've decided to embed it, we have the policies in place, but to ensure that we are continuing and our staff are continuing to implement and practice quality and accountability at all times. And there are always things that you can learn from. We want to ensure that we're meeting the commitments. We want to also know that there is quality in the work that we're doing and the work that our partners are doing. And also, I think it's important with certification is that you can't just say we're committed and we're part of the organization, but we have to. There are always corrective actions that we have to address within quality and accountability, and we have to do that within a specific time frame. So it's not something that we can say we don't have time for it now. We have to do it if we want to continue our certification. So that's really important for us. I'd like to actually ask the participants to complete a poll, if that's okay. I think that will be pulled up now. There's several aspects for us as an organization that are really challenging with certification. But before I go into that, I just wanted to hear what you feel with your organizations. And here you can take up maybe hundreds of examples of what's challenging from the CHS, but I tried to focus on 10 based on the commitments. So if the participants could maybe fill out the poll. And the question is, from your experience, what are the 2 most challenging CHS requirements to adhere to in your organization. So you can select about 2 of those. If everybody, I'll give you about a minute maybe to fill that out. What, from your perspective in your organization, is the most challenging? Yep, so a couple more seconds and then maybe we can show the results. All right, Kiran, can you show the results for us?
Okay.
Yeah, is it working? Great, thank you so much for participating. So looking at this, I think, which maybe perhaps is no surprise, that complaints handling is the one that is the most challenging for you and your organizations to implement. But also relevant and timely response. We have quite high comments on that. Staff care and competency. I think that that's extremely challenging, especially when in areas where there's a lot of insecurity happening. But then also just ensuring, you know, if there's a lot of staff turnover, to ensure that there's a lot of learning, that the continual learning for staff coming into organizations, and managing resources effectively, and equal and mutually accountable partnerships. Absolutely. And I think the other one is information sharing. I think, yeah, that is also definitely a challenge. For us within ACT Church of Sweden, and what we continually have to address in every single audit that we've had, is our complaints handling and how we work with prevention of sexual exploitation and abuse. So we've never had an audit where we haven't had a corrective action that we've had to address there. I think complaints handling in one aspect, in the CHS, it is the most detailed of the requirements, and so therefore it's a bit challenging because of that. But I think also it is just a challenge. How do you ensure that you've got an open, accessible complaints mechanism? And when we're talking about serious complaints like sexual exploitation and abuse, it's really challenging, obviously, for anybody to come forward. I've had experiences in my own life where, you know, I should have complained and I didn't. And I sit there and I think, why didn't I? I mean, I worked for 10 years helping organizations develop complaints mechanisms. I've done investigations myself and worked on Quantitative for quite a long time. But there are so many barriers to complaining, and how do you make sure that the complaints that are very serious come forward? There can also be the other aspect where you get too many complaints, and then how do you address that and manage it? I think one of the other panelists was sort of addressing about, you know, failures can lead to success in learning. And I think that that's really important. I know our back donor, one of our largest back donors, CEDA, has actually raised with us that they don't think we receive enough complaints. And I think that that is fantastic to hear that, saying that, you know, we want to see more failures because we want to make sure that you're catching when things aren't happening. And so we're working on that to make sure that we actually increase the amount of complaints that we receive. But we also, within our annual reports, try to be very transparent and report about the number of complaints that we receive and the type of complaints that we receive, to say this, you know, this happens, but it's something that we are addressing. I'd also just sort of like to talk a little bit, what are the challenges in being CHS certified from the humanitarian perspective versus the development perspective. I think complaints are challenging from any perspective, but within the humanitarian interventions, it's much easier, and it's organizations know you have to have a complaints mechanism if you want to receive funding. And we work through the ACT Alliance and the appeal mechanisms, and that's not really a challenge. But with our long-term development partners, some of them of which we've had partnerships for over 40 years, it's hard to increase the knowledge and awareness of why a complaints mechanism is important. What is a complaints mechanism, and how do you address the complaints mechanism? But I think, on the other hand, in long-term development, management of resources, which was one of the challenges that was brought up here, is actually a little bit easier. So taking climate change into perspective and doing risk assessments on the environmental impact of programming is much easier in long-term development, where you're there for a lot longer of a time than you are within humanitarian assistance. And I think also within the development sector, for us, it's much easier to find funding to work with local actors and to work with quality and accountability than it is to find funding within a humanitarian intervention to work on these issues. The CHS certification really changed the strategic direction of our organization, which I think is really important. And I think one thing that we really like as an organization is that when we make a commitment, like signing on for Charter for Change, so ensuring that funding goes to local partners, we actually have to follow up on this because we will be certified against it. And if we don't, then we will have issues with that. So for us, it's about saying that our commitments mean something and that we have to deliver on them. I mentioned a little bit about working with partners and how it's really important for us to have mutual and accountable partnerships. This is, however, a balancing act, because as a donor and within back donor requirements, there are things that we require. We require that you have a code of conduct for your staff. We require in humanitarian interventions that you have a complaints handling mechanism. We require participation of communities, and we will check on that when we do follow-up and monitoring. However, within that, we also say that partners have a right to require things from us as an organization and as a partner. So they have a right to be able to complain against us. They have a right to require information from us as well. And so it's really important for us to have that as a dialogue and to manage that balancing act. I'd like to go in a little bit about donor requirements, where I did mention that it's harder for us to find actual funding for implementing equality and accountability in the humanitarian sector. And I think it's a real challenge right now in the humanitarian sector, where we're talking about localization, we're talking about real quality and programming, but and needs are increasing in the world, as we all know. It's really challenging. It's incredible what has happened over the last few years, where we've gone from about 70 million to now over 400 million people requiring humanitarian assistance. And what are going to be the impacts of COVID-19? But we also need to look at, and what we're trying to do in a part of our organization is to say, okay, let's look at the due diligence. So what really frustrates me right now with quality and accountability is that there's so many different donor requirements. And we feel that we as an organization that receives back donor funding, but also has the communications with partners, we're really trying to work at the global level and the policy level to say, you know, look, let's try and have same due diligence. Let's look at what makes the impact within our quality programming in order to really implement with quality and accountability. So a few years back, together with some of the members of the ACT Alliance, we worked on developing a PMER system for the implementing partners within mostly, within certain programs we work with, where the ACT Alliance works. And we said, let's put together PMER, reporting, application process for all of the local partners so they know what to do. When they come to us 10 organizations, we don't have different formats and different requirements. We still have that in place and we're trying to work on it, but we weren't able to fully implement it because the back donors were requiring different types of financial auditing, where it became down to is 42 different questions other than the basic financial reporting. We really tried to work with the donors to have them realize that this isn't what's making the difference. We didn't quite get there, but we are still working with donors. And so, for example, what we did as an organization is submitted and worked with the auditors that did the CHS audit to submit this to ECHO to renew our framework partnership agreement with ECHO. So instead of having another auditor come in, do a whole other new audit process, we have submitted together with HQI our CHS report, and they've looked into 4 other aspects that weren't included in the CHS certified certification to submit this. We are hoping and we are in discussions with ECHO that they will accept this. And this is one way where we're working towards trying to get donor recognition instead of having several different due diligence processes. So at last, I just want to say that it's a policy question now, I think. How do you really implement quality and accountability in our organizations? But it's also within the programs that we do and how you ensure it. Management buy-in, as Shama was saying in the introduction, is extremely important from all levels of management. And I think in some ways we've embedded it so well in our organization that staff don't know that they're doing quality and accountability. And now we need to make it much more explicit. This is why you're doing the things that you're doing or the way that we work. And I just think, there are challenges and it's not easy with quality and accountability, but for us as an organization, it is really worth it. It's really important. And always going back to why are we doing this? And it's to ensure quality programming for affected populations and to keep people who are in challenging and difficult situations at the center of our work. Thank you.
Thank you, Colleen. And someone mentioned, Colleen, that of course Church of Sweden is one of the best organizations in the world. So its work has been impacted in humanitarian and development work. So I'm going to open the floor for question and answer. And leading on from there, first and foremost, thank you, Colleen, thank you, Mayforth, and thank you, Higuchi. Leading on from that, the question is, both you and Higuchi also mentioned that it is important to report failure. It is important to take corrective actions. When the organization is open to receiving these kind of failures or reporting of this, and it's easier. But when the donor is not open to receiving or hearing about failures, what tips would you give to organization? What can organizations do to shift this attitude and mindset? Colleen, I'll go with you since I'm looking at you, and then I'm going to ask Higuchi to also respond to that question.
Sorry, so how do we shift the attitude to?
Because, yeah, earlier on, both of you mentioned that it's important to report what's not working, report the failure, and if the donors or organizations are open to hearing failures, it's easy.
Yeah.
But if they are not, it's definitely not easy. So what suggestions do you have to shift this mindset so that there is this ability to report failures, but more that the donors are open to hearing these failures?
Yeah, well, for us, I mean, we included, I think, in our policy work. So working with, for example, CETA, who is our largest back donor. I mean, we just had a conversation with them about 3 or 4 weeks ago where they were saying, oh, prevention of sexual exploitation and abuse, and this came up in 2018. And within Europe, we all know, it was a media scandal that was happening. And I kind of sat there a little bit flabbergasted. Well, PSCA, prevention of sexual exploitation and abuse has been happening for a long time. NGOs have been working on this for a long time. So when we had that discussion with CETA, we're in a situation where we could be at the forefront and say, look, this isn't from 2018. We've been working on this. There's resources out there. And CETA, instead of developing something completely different or not looking at, all the learnings, here are resources that are available. Here's e-learnings that you can look into. So I think it's about also educating the donor and not think that the donors always have that back information. And CETA has now been opened and said, okay, let's continue these discussions and make sure it happens. I mean, sometimes it works and other times it doesn't. But I think to be vocal and to push back, I think is important. And of course, you have to do it diplomatically and politely to make sure it happens. And I think, challenging the donors and as we did with coming with this PMER sort of application process and saying we're trying actually to follow up with what the Grand Bargain is saying and localization and pushing it through. Although we didn't succeed on it, I think we certainly made some inroads with the donors that we spoke with and some challenges. So I think it's about being vocal, about working on it diplomatically to try and make those changes. And I think it's about walking the talk. So we are also, we receive a lot of funds from the parishes and the dioceses in Sweden. We have that ability to put our funding, in some ways where we want to through that. And we have to make sure as an organization that we're not just saying this is what we commit to, but then we do something else. And so for us, that's in part why certification is so important, because it checks to make sure that we actually do what we said we are going to do. Of course, we get it wrong sometimes. We are not the best organization in the world. We do get it wrong, but yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Colleen. Higuchi, would you like to add?
Yep. Well, sometimes we also have, complaint mechanism to government, position is opposite, then definitely we will complain. We will have complaint to government about, like system of funding or maybe Colin said about localization, etc., etc. Yeah, of course, we mentioned it to our government as well. Then, when it comes to CBO in the field, where, for example, since I am officer of M&E as well, so I have opportunity to visit the site in the field. Then, when I look at those beneficiaries, especially like women or girls, then definitely we have a focal group discussion and other way to listen the voice from beneficiaries. Then if in case they never speak such kind of failure or complaint, definitely I will have suspicious, something wrong, how did they organize this focal group discussion? So through such experience, I always say, failure is opportunity, to learn something. So just open at first. Otherwise, if you close, your management way of thinking, then, we can't reach it. We can't hear, we can't listen to the voice of beneficiaries, So that's what, I'm reminding Japanese NGO as well, always,
So it takes a lot of effort also to educate, as Colleen mentioned, to start this process of sharing failures. And I just want to quote what Shama said, that when there is a lack of trust between partners, it becomes more difficult to share failures because some donors will penalize the partners, and that is perceived as penalization, even though maybe the donors will not penalize, but this ingrained attitude that, okay, I will not share failures. And I also want to relate to that when we talk about trust. Alex Schmidt is asking, are we doing enough that communities can trust us as agencies? So are we doing enough as communities that communities can trust us as agencies? Mayford, I'm going to put forward this question to you.
And when we say, are we doing enough? I think it's more of how are we doing it together with them, because um, the more that we involve them with the process as well as the projects, as if we have projects with them, with the communities, uh, the more that we are doing more for them, because they feel that they're really part of the process, they're really part of the assessment and then the planning as well as the implementation. And the more that you do it on your own and you let them do very little, and then the accountability will not be also good. It should be a balance of things, no? And of course, as an organization, you should always be conscious on what, to whom are you doing this for. That's why we're constantly saying that if you do a project, let's just make sure, of course we have to do deliverables and everything. It's it's not really good not to do that, but at the same time just make sure that above that you will at least fill the gap and needs which the community really needs, not because of the project itself. So I think you can do more if you share more of the responsibility with the stakeholders and the beneficiaries and the partner beneficiaries. I think that in my opinion, just like one example, when I was browsing the question and answer, saying there's this assessment, how would you do the assessment, wherein the people are complaining they would like everybody of them would be included in the list of beneficiaries, and then how will you do it? So the answer I've also seen in the chat box was to involve them in the assessment so that they themselves will be the one to say whom amongst them are really in need. So you would have like you would not have the burden to really choose which. In our experience, we did that. We're in initial assessment, of course, you did with your community partner and with the local government, just to have the initial list. But we have a validation amongst with the people of the community, and then they will validate the list. They would say, oh, that one is really far. Oh, that one is really near. And then they will say, you should add this, like this and that. And then you let them decide. Of course, well, that would be really very exciting, at the same time very tricky. You should have all the parameters of to make sure that you do no harm. Again, accountability also have the big bulk also is the issue of participation of the people who are in need.
Sure. Thank you, Mayfort, and thank you for picking up that question about the long list of communities. Yeah? One more question, or rather comment, is also from Alex, who's saying that are we actually willing to give power and control away to people and communities? I think definitely that's what we are trying to answer here, but is there genuine willingness, commitment to do that? I think that is still long way to go, in my view. Another question, and this is related to government: if the government is open, transparent, has high integrity, and it will be easier to work with. And this question is, if some of the local government structures are not necessarily having negative influence towards the organization, where it affects the neutrality of this organization, how do organizations work with this kind of government? What are some of the suggestions to work with government that is not exhibiting very high integrity level, yet there is a drive from donors to keep working with government? Mayfort, you can take that question, and then I'll ask others too.
I think one good thing is to work on the principles to whatever government you are working with. Like, for example, here in the Philippines, we adhere to so many the SFDRR, the Sustainable Development Platforms, all the framework that is very, very good, and we are all following. You can make it as one of your entry point, because you know that your government is also adhering to it. And then together, if you have some differing of issues and everything, you should go back to those agreements, so that you would have some starting point. I think that is one thing, but hopefully you have the same framework. If you have different frameworks, I think you would the best thing to do is, again, to go back to what would help the communities that you both serve. It is the basic thing. So I have two things, the both oppositing: the international framework that can be your basis of your action, at the same time the local need, no? So if you try to do those things, then you would have I think you can make it as a strategy in talking with this government.
Thank you, Mayfort. Okay, one more question. How do we truly embed accountability in organizations' core values? Not necessarily the culture or policy, but how do we embed accountability in organizations' core values? I'm going to start with Colleen and then Higuchi.
I mean, that's a tough question, I think. As I said, I think when I was speaking, instead of talking about, we implement with the CHS and the commitments within the CHS, we've changed it and said these are the commitments that we as ACT Church of Sweden signs on to. This is what we believe in. We've built things into our policies and programs, like I also said, and it means at times that staff maybe not understand why exactly, we have certain requirements as a staff member of what they need to do and how we work. But now we're working on that, because it's important not only to have it so embedded, it's also important to know explicitly why you are doing this. So that's our next step to take with staff. I think that's really important. And I think for me also, it's it's really important that management is continually questioned on whether or not are you actually implementing against the commitments that you've made as an organization. And moving forward, I think a lot of our organizations are going through some challenging times with COVID-19, with funding decreases. And therefore, I think it's important not just to say, how do we handle this challenge, but okay, what organization do we want to be in 5 to 10 years? How do we get there? So for us, we are going through a challenging time. We've said we are committed to localization. I think we're doing quite well in that in our development. I don't know the percentage. We're having more challenging time doing that with the humanitarian aspect, where it's been from 20% to, I think, 4 or 5% of funding going to local actors. So what we're doing now, instead of, looking at how do we manage the economics, it's okay, we really want to believe in this we really believe in localization. How do we make that happen in 5 to 10 years? And that perhaps means that there's a lot less people in Sweden, in Uppsala, working, and that we have people working within the country programs, not to implement, but to have that closer linkages to our partners, to work together to build our capacity and their capacity together. And so for me, it's about always going back to the question, why do we exist? Effective population. And I think it's really interesting. We've had a discussion last week in our organization. We're talking about, well, what term do we use? Should it be beneficiaries? Should it be affected communities? Should it be target groups? Should it be, what do we use? And really, in a lot of this accountability stuff, it's basic sense. So when we talk about codes of conduct, what are we talking about? Be a decent person. What are we talking about when it comes to accountability? Do quality programming. Why are we here? Why are we delivering these things? And it's so that affected communities get their needs met, but also what they say, is their needs, and then to create a situation where they're not in a situation where they need support, right? So going back to the basics, I think is extremely important. It's really not that, some of it is complicated, but much of it isn't. And it's just about making sure we don't complicate this more than it needs to be. Thanks.
Thank you, Colleen. I agree. We shouldn't complicate things, but then common sense and what is basic is often more difficult than the complex things. Yeah. Higuchi, do you have anything to add on that question earlier? How do we embed accountability in core value?
Well, I give you an example like, now we have about 14 programs as 40 programs in the worldwide. And then, first, our finance matter is that we are depending on government funds. Like more than 80% of funds come from Ministry of Foreign Affairs. That's our challenge is that, we should increase private fund more and more, not only depending on government fund. That's our own program. And then, when we talk about like values, core values and activities in our organization, and then, there is one example I heard recently is that some assembly members requested, to adjust one of the missions of Japan platform. Then, when we talk about our mission, first, I would like to say that those secretariat, those staff like me should talk about mission and suggest to both or assemblies. Not they are the one who made decision, but we should consider mission itself. Yeah. Otherwise, how can we share our core values among organization? Yeah, that's what I said. I talked to one of my boss. Then, if someone asks, how about your accountability to embed it in your organization, Mr. Higuchi? It's a really tough question. Yeah, yes and no, because we also try, to make such value of core as organization, and then, through like I said, like failure and mistake, could be opportunity to learn and it will be success in future. Yeah, it's something to us. Yeah, always we should value, such kind of accountability, and always, we should practice. We do practice always. Otherwise, sorry, I can't say 100% yes, but we should try. That's what my message to you. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank Thank you, Higuchi. Thank you for being open. And it's not always easy, as you said. And what I'm picking up from what you and Colleen mentioned is it goes back to the questions of relevance. Is the organization relevant? Are we relevant? I'm going to also ask you to comment on this question since it is the theme of the panel today. Is accountability truly embedded in core values? And you mentioned earlier about accountability as way of life. Would you like to comment on that? And then I will try to close the session up.
Yes, we're also not that perfect. But we are trying our best to, we have this code of conduct, and this code of conduct we try to continuously, at least every year during our assessments, during our meetings, to remind people of what we should do with our code of conduct. So we have also issues, and we have also policies on PISEA, things like that. So constant capacity building for our staff. Second is, as I've said, we've been doing a lot of participatory processes in our advocacies and also in making our policies, so that everybody would have the feed of what does it really mean. But still, we're still building on a lot of things as we go on. Our policies, we call it, our policies are alive. It's constantly changing and molding and things like that. It's just not like one policy and that's it. No, as we see, there's needed to be some adjustment. Then we do some adjustments, and so that's for our staff and our organization. Thank you.
Okay. I'm very conscious of the time. We have approached 90 minutes now. So I would like to close this session. I'm sorry if I don't take on all the other questions, but I would like to thank Colleen, Mayforth, and Higuchi for sharing your perspectives about your journey in accountability. And I do regard it as a journey. It's not perfect. It is not going to be easy. It takes years sometimes, but I think the key is if there is increase in personal accountability, if the questions are being asked in the organization about these issues, then I think we are moving in the right direction. It will take time. I know sometimes maybe some of us can be a bit skeptical. However, everything starts with some small steps. And I really, from the bottom of my heart, would like to thank three of you for sharing your failures. There you go. We started today, and it's not only sharing what works well, but also what was the barriers and what failed. So once again, thank you very much, and thank you to the audience and for some very brilliant chats. I'm going to hand it over to our host, Shama, and once again, maybe we will see you in another event, and thanks everyone. And Shama, back to you.
Thank you, Uma. So thank you all very much for being a part of this webinar and for actively commenting and posting questions. They were very stimulating. Many of you highlighted some challenges that we all face at various levels when promoting accountability. However, I think we have to remember that challenges also present opportunities to learn and improve, even though we do tend to get very pessimistic at times about the level of change that can happen in our sector. However, I think this event has been very useful for us as well, as we also continue to learn and meet like-minded people. A very special thanks to our panelists, Mayforth Lunetta, Hiroki Yuguchi, and Colleen Hemskirk for sharing their experiences from different perspectives and for being so open and candid about it, as Uma also highlighted. A big thank you to you, Uma, for designing and facilitating this webinar. We will stay connected in Zoom for an additional few minutes in case any of you would like to informally chat with us, or if you have any additional questions for us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Colleen,
Thank you very much.
Thank
Sorry?
you.
Thank you.
Will you go back to bed?
You don't see, I work in my guest bedroom, so I have a bed right behind me here.
I see.
Okay. Thank you all. Colleen, Mayforth, Higuchi, it was very enlightening and refreshing when you are very open and candid. I hope you enjoyed the session. I definitely did.
Yeah. I enjoyed
Thanks.
also reading all the comments and questions. People were participating so actively.
Likewise.
And, some very good challenging questions and issues as well.
Yeah.
Are we
We can
really
still
doing that?
share a lot next time.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. I think online 90 minutes is quite enough, but if we have longer session, then we have to take a break and then go, because people do have a lot of question and group work maybe in the future. Shama, you can think about the speakers again and do it a bit differently in terms of the format.
Yeah.
I'll be happy to be part of it.
Yeah.
Okay, Shama, do you want us to continue to stay or?
I guess if there are no any further questions or comments, we can start signing off.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Or Uma, you can stay a bit longer.
Like maybe there should be a question wherein how what we do to donors who are promoting localization, but they themselves are having a hard time implementing it. There are quite a challenge.
Very
Anyway,
true.
maybe next time.
Yeah,
Next
yeah.
time,
Thank
yeah.
you, Mayforth. We almost thought you couldn't make it, but we are so happy that you could make it.
I'm here. I'm here. Don't worry, Uma. It's our Christmas party in our organization right now. So I just took off and then went here.
There was a question for May 1st. There's a request. Would you be able to share literature on the evaluation tree? Would you be able to send us?
What we don't have. Do you want a list of the questions?
Yeah, I
For
think
the
so.
yeah.
I think you were referring to it.
Yeah. So
So how do you ensure the flowers or recommendations are reflected in new projects? So if you have any information or material around that, if you could email it to one of us and then we can share it with the participants.
Okay. I will ask our meal person to share it. So
Thank
I
you.
won't send it the same email addresses, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. If any tools that can be shared and the
Yeah.
presentation, we will share it with the participants also.
All right. Yes, sure, definitely. Thank you.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much.
Merry Christmas.
Happy
Yeah,
holidays.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a nice day and
See you.
thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a good day.
Nice to see you.
Bye.
You too. Bye. Bye.
Bye.